The awareness journal, there's 4 aspects in awareness journal. They're 1 sentence as a minimum for each one. How much you want to write is up to you. But the minimum is really all you need for the biggest impact, because it'll teach you how to be succinct. So the first place we're going to go to is IQ. What did you learn today? Number 2 is EQ. What did you notice today? That's self-awareness. Number 3 is advocate. And number 4 is gratitude. It's the first 2 that I want to spend a little time on. In the IQ, there's 2 actual sections to it. It's a sequential learning process that grows on top of the other. Number 1, just learn a piece of knowledge. Learn something. Here's one that I remember reading from one of my clients. I learned that insurance companies have a rider in there that allows you to run out of gas and they'll pay for someone to bring you new gas. Okay. That's something they learned. Something you learned would be a data point somewhere in the sciences, in learning. I learned how to bake soap, Swiss bread. All right, that's learn. But knowledge isn't power, and this is the big fallacy in the world today. They think because you accumulate more information, more data points, more knowledge, that somehow that makes you more powerful. It can actually incapacitate you because you know so much. What we want to do is learn to know how. That's wisdom. That's applied knowledge. So you're going to start by just getting in the habit. Notice something you learn. Pay attention to it. Get up in the morning with the intention to learn something today. With time, and this will come in usually in harmony with the emotional intelligence aspect, learn how to do something. For example, one of the ones I saw that really made me feel good was, I learned how to de-escalate my teenager today. And they said, I learned how to use connect and redirect. One of the most rewarding of all time was, after 18 months, I learned that flippin works, and I learned how to use flippin. Frequent, low risk, personal, positive, and neutral. We just had that a little bit in the previous section here. So you want to know how to, wisdom. Then in the emotional intelligence, there's 3 levels, sequential levels. First of all, just notice and name a behavior in someone else. I noticed that was unsolicited criticism. I noticed that's an unsolicited opinion. I noticed that they're relating. I noticed that was sarcasm. Notice the emphasis on the name, because consciousness is just a subjective awareness of what's going on around us. We're trying to eliminate, vacuum out any kind of subjectivity. In other words, no judgment. Just give it a name. That is sarcasm. That was criticism. But you're not telling them. You're not going up and you're going, oh, by the way, I just want to point out to you that you're being very sarcastic right now. That's not going to be effective. Just pay attention to it. Why? Because if you give it a quick name, you'll start learning to integrate upstairs and downstairs, and you'll associate a feeling with it. And we'll get to that in a second. Then notice something in yourself. I noticed today that I use sarcasm to mask pain, to mask anger. I notice that I'm very critical of my wife. I notice that I'm very critical of my children. As a leader, I notice that I'm constantly using sarcasm, or I'm always defending myself, or I'm afraid to put out my own opinion for fear that it'll be judged, and so I'm very indecisive. You're simply giving it a name. Next, observe the impact of that behavior. I'm going to use relating for a second. You're standing with a group of friends and you're all chatting. Someone brings up a point that, their loved one just died of COVID. And then you notice that someone else needed to also have a death story to share. They said, my uncle, he died of COVID too. Pay attention. The first person who says it thinks that everyone's listening to that person. But when someone else trumps them, relates, takes the wind out of their sail, pay attention to the body language of the person who said it initially. Pay attention to the body language of other people. And then pay attention to the energy in the room. This is self-awareness. When you're awarenessing, you're paying attention. It costs something. You're investing into your own happiness, joy, and well-being. Paying attention or having awarenessing simply means you're exerting energy. It's costly energy. But the return on investment comes in the learning process when you learn how. when you start acquiring knowledge. And the more you learn how, the more aware you are, the greater or the closer in proximity you come to happiness, joy, and well-being. Now the last two are real straightforward. How did you take care of yourself today? How did you advocate? Examples. I went to bed on time. I practiced my sacred hour. I did mindfulness. I actually have an implementation statement to say, I will go to bed at 10 o'clock lights out, so I'm starting my awareness or my sacred hour at 9. So when you advocate for self, you're respecting self, you're putting a boundary around yourself. The highest form of love is self-love when done with the intent to serve others. You're not doing it for narcissistic or selfish purposes. If I'm a father, the greatest thing I could do for myself is to make sure I'm rested so I can then deal with the crumb crunchers on the morrow. Mother's the same thing. But when you give everything away, when you leave everything on the table at your own expense, your effectiveness as a parent diminishes. And eventually, you're the one who ends up needing to be served. Lastly, what are you grateful for? It's hard to be critical and sarcastic through the eyes of gratitude. That filter actually is an insulating filter that elevates your level of awareness. Hopefully that helps. See you soon.